Picture this. You survived a PhD and maybe even 1 or 2 postdoc contracts, and now you are applying for a job in the industry. They write, Agile experience required. And you are like, yeah, sure, of course I'm flexible. Did you ever wish to have a Babel fish to translate this Agile jargon to plain English? You know, I've been in industry for almost 10 years and I have a PhD. And some of the Agile methodologies still feel slippery to me, despite a million articles that, for me, look all the same, to be honest. So, now I am creating for you what I was desperately searching for. Consider this your Babel fish. So, you are a brilliant researcher, and of course you land that job. My congratulations. Day 1. Your first sprint planning. Someone asks if the backlog is groomed and you are wondering if they have a cat. And then they ask you to install the poker app if you didn't already. What the hell is going on? And then it comes as an avalanche. Velocity, burn down, definition of done, epics, story points, retrospective, work in progress limits. And everybody nods, and you nod too, because hey, you have a PhD, you're reading papers in 3 different languages, you published in high-impact journals, you survived review in number 2. And yet, somehow, you feel like the dumbest person in the room. So you do what all researchers would do. You go look for your answers. And you find millions of articles, trainings, certifications, circular Scrum flowcharts with errors in all directions. You know, I even bought the book which explains Kanban embedded in a crime story. So, you read it all, and somehow you still don't get it. And the problem is not the vocabulary. Once you understand that grooming the backlog means basically sorting your to-do list, you're fine. But none of these articles explain the why these methodologies exist actually. Here is what I realized. These methodologies are not arbitrary. They were invented by people who were afraid of something very specific, and they tried to protect themselves against these fears. For instance, Waterfall people were afraid of chaos. Scrum people were afraid of losing direction. Kanban people were afraid of overload. Safe people were afraid of basically everything. So different fears resulted in different systems. But they all had the same goal, kind of, to ship something that works without losing your mind. So let's go through them one by one. Not how they work exactly, because for this you find millions of articles online, but why they exist. Starting with Waterfall. I remember I have seen a Waterfall book on my professor's shelf during my computer science studies. And to me, it felt like an alien artifact. I never touched it. And it turned out that it was not that wrong, this feeling. Waterfall was born from a fear of losing control when you're building something complex. And the answer they had was, plan everything up front. Literally everything. You write down your full requirements and then you do the design, then implementation, then testing. One phase at a time. And it kind of flows downwards like a waterfall. And it makes perfect sense if you build something big, like a bridge, where you have a fixed timeline and your surprises are super duper expensive. If you build bridge from 2 different directions and not meet in the middle, it's a disaster, right? The problem is that software is not made of concrete like bridges. Your requirements are changing all the time, and you don't know what users actually want until you show it to them. And then, after the user test, you start changing your UI because they didn't understand where to click on. Also, the market shifts. By the time you finish your perfectly planned 2 years project, the world just moved on. The waterfall optimizes for predictability in the world which is not predictable anymore. And everything that came after Waterfall was a reaction to this mismatch. So people got frustrated with Waterfall, and then separately in different countries, in different companies, they started experimenting with other ways of working, lighter, faster, like Scrum, extreme programming, feature-driven development, and so on. And those methodologies were competing against each other, and then 2001, somebody had an idea to bring these people together in one room. So they searched for a fun location, choosing a ski resort in Utah. And then they compared their notes, they compared their methodologies, and they realized that they are actually all reacting to the same thing. And by accident, they started a movement. The Agile Manifesto was born. So let me emphasize this because this is important. Agile is not a framework or not a process. It's not a methodology, but it's basically a mindset which came from all the different methodologies. It's a philosophical shift from planning everything ahead of time and then execute towards learn fast and adapt to change. They wrote down the manifesto, which contains only 4 bullet points, 4 values. First, individuals and interactions are over processes and tools. Second, working software is over comprehensive documentation. Third, customer collaboration is over contract negotiation. And last, number 4, responding to change over following the plan. That's it. Just 4 bullet points, nothing else. Well, actually, they also wrote 12 principles, but there were no flowcharts, no ceremonies, no planning poker, nothing like that. And Scrum, Kanban, extreme programming, those are methodologies, and they all sit under the umbrella of Agile. Now, let's dig into the methodologies themselves, one by one. Starting with Scrum. Scrum was born from a specific question. How do you stay on course when your destination keeps changing? And the answer was simple. You stop trying to plan everything up front. Instead, you work in short, focused cycles, which are called sprints. Those are, by the way, that circular diagrams. The sprints are usually 2 weeks, and you adjust the course after each sprint. So think of it as a road trip. You do have your general direction, your general destination, but you don't plan every turn up front. Instead, you drive for a while, then you stop. Then you look around, you check the map, you decide how to continue. And then you drive again. So all your ceremonies are basically your navigation checkpoints. And each one exists for a specific question, like, are we aligned? Are we on track? Are we improving? And so on. And the planning poker is basically just a way to estimate how much ground you can cover in the next 2 weeks without the loudest person in the room setting the number for everybody else. Now, Kanban. This is a strange one because Kanban was not born in Silicon Valley. And it's not coming out of frustration with Waterfall, actually. It comes from Toyota factory in 1940s. And the question here was how to avoid a traffic jam in production line. It took really decades before somebody realized finally that you can perfectly apply this approach also to software development. The idea is super simple. You just make your work visible. And you don't start something until you finish what is in progress. So Kanban says you stop starting, you start finishing. But here's where it got confusing for me. Kanban has almost no rules. You don't have sprints, you don't have any ceremonies, no fixed roles, nothing. You just have 3 principles. Make your work visible, limit how much you do at once, and manage the flow. That's it. So if Scrum is a road trip with planned stops, then Kanban is a highway. Your cars enter when they're ready and they move at their own pace. Kanban felt super slippery to me for years because it's like a paper with no methodology section. But now I think it's by design, actually. It's not underspecified, it's minimalistic on purpose. The Agile Manifesto says, simplicity is the art of maximizing the amount of work which is not done. I love that quote, simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done. And Kanban takes this more seriously than anything else. Now, next, SAFe or SAFe. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. That's abbreviation for Scaled Agile Framework. And here's a disclosure, I have not worked with SAFe. So take this with a grain of salt. So here's what I found online. Scrum works great when you have one team, but what if you have 50 teams or 100? This is a question which SAFe tries to answer. And that's a very hard problem, actually. So SAFe exists for a reason. You need to coordinate somehow hundreds of people across teams and align the business and the engineering and the design and everything, and to manage very complex dependencies. However, many people are criticizing that because the solution sometimes resembles the disease. So you have so many layers of structure, of roles, of ceremonies, acronyms, that it may feel like a waterfall which pretends to be Scrum. But lots and lots of companies are using that. Like, I found that Cisco is using it, Lego, Philips using it. However, again, the disclosure, I'm not working at any of those companies, so I'm not 100% sure. Make your own conclusions. Now, last one, extreme programming, or XP. Well, XP is kind of orthogonal to Scrum and Kanban. It operates on a different layer. While Scrum and Kanban answer the question of how to organize and how to manage work, XP suggests a solution to how to actually write a good code. The extreme programming as a term never became as mainstream as Scrum, for instance, but the ideas from extreme programming are now just a solid engineering practices, to be honest. Nothing extreme about them anymore. In particular, it's test-driven development, it's continuous integration, and it's pair programming and code reviews. Now, how it all relates to you personally? Well, if you are through a PhD, then you know all these fears already. Like, did you ever run 3 experiments in parallel and had 2 paper reviews pending and a grant application, and also got constantly distracted by students asking you about homework? Or do you have file names on your hard drive which are something like final revision number 18 commented corrections more .tech? Or did you ever wake up at 2 o'clock in the night and go to your computer to check your code because you are afraid that you might have a bug? Because you are panicking that you might have just submitted a paper with wrong analysis? Well, that's all your fears. Kanban is for the split attention fear, Scrum is for the never finishing fear, and extreme programming is for your fear of bugs in your code. And now you know the solutions. When you walk into the next stand-up, you will hopefully see it differently. And as a bonus, maybe you can then assess whether the methodology your team is using is actually serving them, or if it's just a surviving habits, because spoiler, it often is. And therefore, sometimes Scrum goes terribly wrong, but that's a topic for another video. Now, I truly, truly hope that this video was helpful and that you can use it as your Babel fish. Not as a dictionary, but as a lens. Enjoy!